You're listening to or watching Strangers in Space, and for the next 60 minutes, we are going to be talking about Doctor Who, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hello, I'm Lee.
I am Matt.
I'm Simon.
I'm John.
I'm Ross.
And I'm Mark.
This is a real expanded universe thing because this is our 10th anniversary episode. And we've got special guests, not just the expanded universe, but we've got Mark back from the very first ever Blue Box podcast that we recorded 10 years ago. Before we get stuck into the subject, such as it is for tonight, Mark, go back 10 years. And you'd already been podcasting, but I mean, let's just talk for a couple of minutes about the very beginnings, because this is 10 years after all of podcasting together, despite the lineup having changed over those years. What did you think when I first came to you? And Lee, you can join in on this too. What did the two of you think when I first came to you and said, right, I've been asked to do a podcast, help me out?
Yeah, it was exciting, wasn't it, Mark? Because he was part of the old Starburst magazine thing, which we were like, well, we love that since we were kids. So it could have been anybody. It didn't need to be JR. I was just excited about being part of a magazine. No, I'm joking. It was a brilliant offer, and I got really excited because I've been doing radio. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Well, you were already interested in podcasts and in podcasting, so this must have been a bit of a dream, wasn't it?
I started my own show earlier that same month when you asked. Or was it a bit early? I can't remember now.
I think it was a bit early. I think it was about 3 or 4 months. Yeah.
So I started in January 2012. So yeah, I was still pretty green to it, learning my way. And then an offer just came out of the blue from yourself, and I was like, oh, can't really say no, can I? So
no, you can't. You don't get the option.
No.
But Mark was the first one, and we won't go into why. Mark was the first one to sort of drop out or to start sort of backing off from being in the Blue Box podcast, and eventually sort of dropped out altogether. But you have come back to podcasting more recently, Mark. You're sort of a bit tentatively at first and now a bit more full on. So how's that?
It's good. We had some family health problems, so just had to take a bit of a break for a while. But it's great fun. It's nice to be back. It's because I'm such a sado perfectionist, I do like to take quite a long time to edit these things and put them together. Unlike yourself, you just like to just record and get it out. That's why you're probably doing a lot better than me.
Enough of those stories.
I don't know about better, just more frequently is all.
Yeah, well, it could be that.
It shows, Mark. Can I say, Mark, it is it's a quality product you create.
Yes, thank you, Simon. It's very kind of you to say so. The check
is he saying that it's not a quality product that I create?
No, they're not mutually exclusive.
The 2 episodes of Mark's podcast I'm on, particularly 3 episodes that I'm on, are particularly good. I enjoyed those tremendously.
I think the one that I'm on's got the highest rating. So it's Nerdology, isn't it?
There's Nerdology, and Lee, obviously, you're a bit out of the loop. I have a Doctor Who podcast as well.
What's that called?
Loop.
All of Time and Space.
There you go.
That's All of Time and Space available on all good podcatchers.
You can plug it at the end. Ross, you can plug yours at the end as well. But for the sake of it for now, because Ross is a voice who, I'd call him our American correspondent. I called him in to do a couple of podcasts about American movies from the 1970s. And we seem to have struck up kind of a regular thing where we'll get together every now and again and sort of repeat it because we enjoyed the conversation we had so much. I'm going to try and get him on a bit more frequently. But Ross, tell everybody what your regular podcast is.
Well, I have 3, which is sad, I think. I have 2 Doctor Who ones. Yeah, I have 2 Doctor Who ones, Gallifrey's Most Wanted with my best friend Vic, and Runcible Report with Jeff Goddard. Me and Vic talk about individual stories and just gab about them. And Jeff and me will talk about almost anything related to Who. And I just started a few months ago a comic book podcast called Stop, Let's Team Up. It's a podcast about comic books, mainly about team ups or super teams, because those are the comics that got me hooked on that. That's my first kind of nerd love is comic books. So I'm having a blast doing that.
I'm loving your Twitter feed. Absolutely loving it.
Oh my God, it's making me deep dive on stuff I haven't read in 30 years, and that's a very nice community, I'd have to say, on Twitter. I'm lucky. I avoid the Comics Gate guys, which are kind of like the NMDs on steroids.
Right, let's move on, shall we, and get stuck into the subject that we came here to talk about tonight, which is the poll of winners. Because as the listeners and viewers will probably know, for the past 2 years since the start of the pandemic, we've been on a bit of a voyage going through all of Doctor Who a season at a time, and we've been inviting our listeners to vote on the stories. And I collated all the results together, and I decided that as some seasons had 4 stories and some seasons had 9 or 10, and so the sort of rundown list that I created of how the voting had gone wasn't really representative of the top of the list as such, because some stories were getting much higher votes due to the nature of the voting. I thought I'd put all the winners into a hat together and get the listeners to vote on those so that we could find out definitively what our listeners' favourite stories are. Now, it's a bit of an arbitrary list because some things like Talons of Weng-Chiang and Listen ended up coming second. Blink even ended up coming second. So they're not on the list at all. But I figured if our listeners hadn't voted those first, then they weren't going to vote them first overall, were they? No. So the top 5, maybe 10 at least on this list is basically a definitive list of our listeners' favourite stories. But I'm going to run down the whole list. We'll start talking about the stories themselves maybe when we get to the top 25. I'll run down the whole list for anybody who really wants to know how things came in. Before we get there, it's a list that is weighted, I would say, towards the classic series, because nostalgia plays a big part in how we vote for these things. However, offsetting that is the fact that approximately 2/3 of the list is classic series stories and approximately 1/3 of the list is new series stories. So despite the fact that the votes are weighted towards the classic series, they're also spread among the classic series. So actually the final list has got a nice balance between the modern and the old. And so it's kind of a much more balanced list than it might otherwise have been. In 41st place, out of 41 stories, on 0.7% of the available vote, in other words, I worked out what the whole vote would be if one of the stories had been first place in everybody's, responses. On 0.7% of the vote it could have had, in last place is Terror of the Vervoids.
So if Mark was editing this podcast, it would have the Top of the Pops theme behind it. That's how professional. Will we have it?
Which Top of the Pops theme though?
It'd have to be Yellow Pearl, wouldn't
it? I got a whole lot of love.
Yeah, that's one.
So a bit of Led Zepp. No, it's a bit of Led Zepp.
No, it'd have to be Phil Lynott, Yellow Pearl, 1980s one.
Whatever.
And Ross, do you know what we're talking about?
I know what Top of the Pops is. Yes, I do not know that it had different theme songs. Over here, we had Soul Train and Dick Clark, and where I grew up, Soul Train was the bigger one. And that,
Have I derailed
on a Sunday afternoon, you'd be watching Don Cornelius and the Dancers.
Have I derailed the podcast already?
Is that Pat's people, but the Americans?
Don Cornelius was the host. He was the coolest man on TV in a way.
I've got a recording of the Pet Shop Boys on the Soul Train, and he goes up to them and goes, "You guys are very funky," like that.
Oh yeah, he was. he was an incredibly cool man.
Right. So he escaped the U-Tree thing, didn't he?
What man doesn't realise is that he's issued me a challenge, and now the Top of the Pops theme will have been running when he points out that it's not running.
You call it a challenge, I call it a request.
Didn't sound much like a request. In joint 39th place on 1.6% of what they could have got, Rosa. I think that's a bit lower than I might have expected it to be, but and the Keeper of Traken.
Oh.
In joint 36th place on 2.1% of the available vote, Delta and the Bannermen, which has 3 stories below it, Simon. 3 stories below Delta and the Bannermen. And also, on the same vote as Delta and the Bannermen, the Time Meddler, and the Waters of Mars.
Wow.
Wow.
In 35th place, in 35th place on 2.3% of the available vote, The Stones of Blood. In 34th on 2.5% of the available vote, Mummy on the Orient Express. In 33% on in 33rd place on 2.7%, The Name of the Doctor, which seemed to me to be getting quite a lot of votes early on as the votes were coming in and then tailed off a bit. In 32nd place on 3.4%, The Aztecs. In joint 30th place on 3.8%, The Impossible Astronaut, which is stupidly low, and Revelation of the Daleks, which is stupidly high.
Other opinions are available.
Yes, I enjoyed that at the BFI the other day, more than I had in years, to be honest.
I mean, I'd enjoy Revelation of the Daleks if I was stupidly high.
I thought that was the way you're supposed to watch it.
I think it's the only way you can watch it.
That would explain.
In 29th place on 3.9%, Village of the Angels. Which actually, because of the nature of the voting in the overall list, Village of the Angels had come like second or third. It was so high because nothing else from Flux got any first place votes at all, really. But overall in this vote, not so high. Just above it on 4.5% in joint 27th place, Fugitive of the Jadoon and The Power of the Daleks. So I don't know if Power of the Daleks is a bit lower than people might have expected, but it didn't get in the top 25. And in 26th place on 5.4%, also missing out on the top 25, The Green Death.
Ooh.
Right.
So you were looking for a reaction there.
Yeah.
Well, Green Death is one of those ones that everybody has such fond memories of. I kind of expected it to be higher, but then the top 25 is quite strong because these are all stories that came first in their respective seasons, right? So it's bound to be a strong list, I think. In 25th place, and there are no tied positions now. These are all, in positions by themselves. In 25th place on 5.7%, The Daleks Master Plan. Mark, you covered that recently on All of Time and Space. What conclusions did you come to about it?
Well, we spent 3 hours talking about it over the space of 2 episodes. And
I noticed.
I love it. It's what we can see of it. It's very, very good. It's quite an undertaking, 12 parts plus an extra sort of prologue as well. But I think it just sums up everything that's great about 62. You've got Hartnell really on his game. You've got a guest cast to die for, literally. It's and it doesn't flag. You'd think, after 12 parts, it would just, start to fall apart. But right to the end, it just keeps going and it sticks the landing. It's really good.
25th place, though. Anybody throw in a thought on this? 25th place, it's the highest placed William Hartnell story. Is that too low? Do we undervalue the First Doctor? Anybody?
I think that is a little low.
There are some low.
Yeah. I would think one of them would break the top 10. There's some,
At least on Unearthly Child.
Yeah. I'm an Aztecs. That's kind of my go-to, or the Time Meddler. Me and Jeff just covered season 2, and it's one of my comfort who's, that, hey, I can watch that anytime. It holds up. It's, it doesn't, it holds up, and it was made 50 years, 60 years ago, whatever now. It's still entertaining.
You call it comfort who, I call it pillow who.
Push you to sleep.
Yeah. In a nice way.
All right. In 24th place, on 6.3% of the available vote, The Web of Fear. Ross, what do you think of The Web of Fear?
It's okay. I like it. It wouldn't be in my top 10 Troutons, top 5 Troutons. It's nice that we have it now, but I think it's one of those ones when they found it, when they found it in Enemy of the World, I'd never really kind of gotten what the big deal about Enemy of the World was. And when I saw it, I went, oh, now I get it. And Web of Fear, It's good. It's not great.
It still won its season though, so I think what Ross says about Enemy of the World being the one that caught people's attention back in October 2013 is right. But actually, the Web of Fear still won the season. Anybody throw in a thought? Do we think the Web of Fear was right to have won that season?
It's a difficult season to judge, really, isn't it? Because it's very much kind of a formula they're playing to there. They did the one big set with a few sets off it, and I kind of think it is because it's really well directed, and I think that's why it gets the verdict over the other things. Whereas maybe we can't see Wheel in Space, maybe that would get it, but it's just the best example of what that season does well, I think.
Right, in 23rd place on 6.6%, Day of the Daleks. John, stick with you. Day of the Daleks. Are you a fan of Day of the Daleks?
It's okay. I've never been a particularly huge fan of it.
I can see my arbitrary choice of people to go to is working well.
It's a nice sort of time paradox story, but I think the deceptive thing is it's not really about the Daleks. They're just almost an afterthought there. So it's fine for me, but I wouldn't have it as the top story of that season myself. So maybe I would have it.
Well, I was just going to say, Mark, as a big Pertwee fan, how do you think Day of the Daleks sits against the other Pertwees?
Against the other Pertwee Dalek stories, it's I think it's the best one.
Yeah, but is that saying a whole lot?
No, not really. Yeah, I mean, I've never really made a secret that he's not necessarily my favourite Doctor, but I quite like it. I have fond memories of reading the Target book as a kid, and I think that perhaps imprinted it onto my heart a little bit compared to some of the others.
It always makes me want to have some wine and teeth every time I watch it.
It's an odd one because I've always been aware of Day of the Daleks, but I can't have been old enough to have watched it, and yet I've always had an awareness of it. So I think it's one of those that sits in your memory.
Maybe because of the book, because it was such a distinctive book, I think. Because that time paradox story really did set it apart from a lot of the others. And it was also a really early VHS, so it was one of the first old ones that I was able to sort of go back to and reacquaint myself with. In 22nd place though, on 7.7%, Matt, Midnight. What do you think of Midnight, Matt?
Which one's Midnight again? Is that the train one?
It's the one on the bus, basically.
I think it's all right. I think it's overrated. I think it relies on you finding that idea of a stolen voice to be incredibly creepy, and I didn't. I applauded the technical ability of getting it right and the acting ability, but I just didn't. I was told on Doctor Who Confidential that this is the most frightening thing ever. If somebody starts speaking your words before or when you do or after you do or before you do. And I just thought, well, actually, I'm not that frightened by that idea. Skeletons in a spacesuit, that's frightening.
That's frightening.
Or children in gas masks, that's frightening.
That's frightening.
But people speaking your words after you,
yeah.
It's just irritating.
Let's hope that works without the Skype feed.
All right, Simon.
I was going to say it's the Blair Witch effect, isn't it? Either you buy into it or you don't.
Yeah.
It's a concept, isn't it?
Performance-wise, I thought it was great.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the best thing about it is the performances.
Well,
can't argue with that
because it's low budget and they had to do something in one room. It's one of those things. It's like a play. You had to work it like a play, which I love. So it was an interesting experiment, which I thought went right. The only problem was they didn't have Donna in there. That would have been great.
In 21st place, on 8.9% of the available vote, Simon, help me out here. Tell me you enjoyed Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
Yes, I did very much enjoy Invasion of the Dinosaurs. I was a late comer to that story. I had no idea the depths and the twists and turns that it does. And despite, it's that thing, despite all of the effects, it's a really effective story. Again, if you can buy into it and ignore all the the vacuum, what do they call it, vacuum filled foam or whatever, all those dinosaurs that look like glove puppets. Just ignore all that and use your imagination, and it's a really great rollicking story.
There's a good book on it, apparently.
Do you want to give yourself a plug there, John?
Oh yeah, I did the Black Archive on this. You know, just keeping up the traditions of the podcast, bigging up the books.
Is Demons on this list? Just out of interest.
Oh,
it must be. It is, isn't it?
We'll find out. We'll find out when we get there, Matt.
But yeah, it's a cracking story. It's relevant today as well. The title is, that no one seems to mention. It's a pun. You know, the dinosaurs of yesterday against the modern kind of political dinosaurs. So yeah, it's Malcolm Hook at his best, and you know the spaceship story is very cleverly done because it's just meant to be a twist. It's not meant to be, oh my God, she's spent 3 years in space, because that's quite clear. You know, it's a great story for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one that gets better on rewatch. Because when I first saw it, I mean, because I saw Doctors Out of Order because I didn't see Third Doctor until I'd seen Fifth Doctor, because the way we got it in my area. But when I rewatched it, I kind of go, oh, I get why people like this one, because I stopped paying attention to the dinosaurs and I pay attention more to the plot and the story. And I think it's a really good unit Third Doctor story.
It's a great book as well.
It's right. Yeah. It's right for CGI enhancement, presumably, if they can spend the money on it.
Somebody put a clip out on Twitter a couple of days ago, and I forget who it was now. It looks quite decent.
Yeah.
It's the work they've done to animate it.
They did say way back when that they'd never be able to do it because of the way it was recorded in the first place, a mix of video and film. And obviously it would involve a kind of mapping that you couldn't do with sort of cheap video level CGI at that point. I don't know whether that situation's changed. I guess there's every chance it might have, because
technology only ever gets better, doesn't it? So
yeah, absolutely.
They will be able to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Lee, while you're there, in 20th place on 9.1% of the vote, Earthshock.
Do you know, I did shed a tear when Adric died, because I was about the same. I was about the same age, I suppose, as he was. Like Simon, we were both relatively around Adric's age, and even though he was playing a dick, I mean, I was like, you know, I cared about the Doctor Who characters, and it was the first time I'd seen one of the characters die in my lifetime, and I think I was kind of like shocked, thinking, no, this can't be right, can it? And then the music didn't play at the end, and I thought, oh no, he's died. This is really weird. And I just, such a sensitive child, I was like,
I remember when the music didn't play, I thought, oh no, you cheesy bastards.
Yeah, but you were older and more cynical, weren't you, by that point?
Not that much older.
Right, because he came back in time flight, so you're okay.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was bad, wasn't it? Yeah, that's the point where I wished he would have stayed dead. Yeah.
Earthshock's made the top 20 though. Anybody like to comment on the fact there's an Eric Saywood story in the top 20?
There's a saying.
What a good director can do, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's like there's a saying: even a blind dog finds a bone. So there's got to be one Eric Saywood story that does make you want to punch him.
That sounds like an American saying.
I love the idea of a blind dog finding a bone.
I own it. That dog you're hearing barking right now is a blind. I do have a blind dog.
Wow. Oh, nice.
Called Mr. Costner. I didn't name him. The pound did. His name is Mr. Kevin Costner.
Well, nice. Maybe you need to name the bone Eric Saywood, so you can...
Moving on. In 19th place on 9.6%, The Girl in the Fireplace. Mark, what do you think of The Girl in the Fireplace?
I adore it. I think it's fantastic. It's David Tennant before he gets too smug. The idea is quite cool, just the whole idea of having the two locations of the spaceship, and then you're going back to whatever period it is in French history. But yeah, really enjoyed it. I like the design of the droids. I think they look fantastic.
It's a
Yeah, just
love story. It's not like a normal Doctor Who story at all, is it?
no.
Tonally, it's very different.
Mhm.
That's what I love about it. I think this
Yeah.
is like top 5 all-time Doctor Who, frankly, or thereabouts.
Mhm.
I think it's placed in slightly wrong period of Doctor Who and Rose's relationship, though. It did feel a little bit like he was cheating on her, even though they weren't together, sort of thing. You know, there's
But as an
plainly
episode-
chemistry.
Yeah, but as an episode that stands apart,
Yeah.
if you watch it by itself, it's just a gorgeous piece of television and way more sort of emotional than Doctor Who normally gets.
It's interesting because this was in Doctor Who's journey as a new series, a modern series. I subconsciously was comparing it to something like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where again they'd modernized a new series, and every now and that you would get these amazing individual stories like Time Zarrow or something like that, or All Good Things, that would stand out from the rest, and you'd find out they'd won Hugo Awards and things like that. And this was Doctor Who doing that. It was this amazing standout episode that you just knew was going to win awards because it was so complete and beautiful. And the first really big dive into Stephen Moffat's brain, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, it's kind of the first time you see Stephen Moffat push against what we're used to, the traditional format of Who, and it's obviously that's the big hallmark of his work since.
Right, in 18th place, and a bit of a jump up to this one. So the top 18 all quite a way ahead of the ones behind them, but in 18th place on 14.5%, which probably doesn't sound as big of a jump as it was when I was putting the votes together. Horror of Fang Rock. Ross, what do you make of Horror of Fang Rock?
That is, I think, one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time. It's one of my favorite Tom Baker ones. I have, as an American, all I had for the first probably 6 or 7 years as a Doctor Who fan were those first 4 seasons of Tom Baker. It wasn't till, the 80s when I got to see anything other than those. And I have a little bit of Tom. I don't look forward to seeing a Tom Baker story, but that's one I can watch anytime.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that one just it's. I think there's no fat to it. Sometimes it works, and I saw them all as omnibus first. Until they came out on VHS, I didn't see them in individual for the most part. I saw those like 2 episodes a night kind of thing, but I love it.
Ross, I love you.
Well, this one is right up your alley, isn't it, Lee?
Oh, it is. I mean, it's the simple fact that it's set at a lighthouse, and I wrote a piece in one of your books, JR, about that, and how passionate I am about lighthouses and how they generally affected me in lots of different ways, in positive ways, actually, and the way I look at the sea and things like that. So everything from the Pescatons to Horror of Fang Rock, anything to do with the sea devils, whatever. I love all of those stories, but it was Horror of Fang Rock that really, I think, put me on that kind of like love for lighthouses and all things sea. 77, wasn't it? So I'd have been 6. Yeah.
And you loved Curse of the Black Spot, didn't you?
Apart from that.
And you're going to really enjoy Legend of the Sea Devils too.
If it's anything like Curse of the Black Script or whatever it's called.
Did we see the trailer that came out for Legend of the Sea Devils today?
Yeah, it looks really good.
No, I haven't seen it yet. I was out doing stuff. Oh, cool.
It
All
looks
right.
like it's got a Merker.
Well, I was just going to say the Merker's back.
Christ, another panto horse.
Yeah.
It's rather different from the original Merker, put it that way. The first comment I saw on Facebook from somebody was, I've just seen the trailer, a bit underwhelmed. So I thought, oh, really? And I went and watched the trailer and I thought, Jesus, no, consider me very much whelmed, actually.
Yeah.
It looks amazing. We'll find out what it's like in due course.
Going back to Fang Rock just very, very quickly before we move on.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Go on.
Do you remember back along?
You're the guest of honour, Mark, so don't let me interrupt
thank
you or anything. You just get right on and tell us your little story about Horror of
Sure.
Fang Rock.
So back along, you got us all to fill in the preference revealer. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Took about 5 years. So the idea is you've got every single episode of Doctor Who, and it will give you 2, and you have to say whether you prefer one or the other. And it takes a very, very long time to do it if you want to do the whole lot in one go. Horror of Fang Rock came out number 1 for me.
Wow.
The preference for me that takes almost as long as your podcast does. Getting through each episode.
Harsh but fair.
I like that.
It's quality, not
In 17th place, on 15% of the available vote, John, the 11th hour.
Oh, funny enough, another one I wrote a book on. This is great. Oh, look at science. Yep, absolutely. This is, again, one of the key episodes of Modern Who. What, you know, you've just lost Russell T Davies. You've lost David Tennant, who's probably the most popular Doctor since Tom Baker and beyond. And you've got essentially someone who, two unknowns to carry one of the BBC's prime shows, and they absolutely do it in style. It's almost as fast as Rose. It's absolutely beautifully directed. It attracted great. By the end of the episode, you've forgotten David Tennant that was there. It's all right. It's Matt Smith time. Let's go. It's basically responsible for the last 10 years of Who, really.
Yeah,
It's a great story. The only thing I can hold against it is that they make zero use of Olivia Colman.
but then she
but that's
wasn't
hindsight.
the Olivia Colman that we know back then, was she?
Yeah.
So
No.
Wait a minute. That was a Mark pun. Zero use.
oh, zero.
Oh.
Zero.
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't. Oh, okay.
No, it really isn't.
I love that one. It's the one. Matt Smith is my doctor. It's like there's something about his performance that clicked with me.
Yeah.
More
I
so-
love you too,
Yeah.
Ross.
that that he was, when I saw the Confidential, when they announced him, I'm like going, okay, I've seen him. I had seen him in that mystery show he had been with Billy Piper, as the sidekick. And I went, what's the hell's this? He's a 12-year-old. What the hell? And then within his second sentence, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I get it. I understand this. He's got it. He creates the perfect doctor for my kind of taste. What I want out of the doctor. I want him a little zany.
Mm-hmm.
I want him a little less angsty. I was getting kind of tired of, poor pitiful me. I'm,
And the way he turns up, it instantly connects with the kid.
yeah.
That was really what sold him to me. That was
Yeah.
just instant Doctor. I think if that first scene had been with grown-ups instead, we wouldn't have seen that side of Matt Smith so early, and that was what sold him.
And I think it shows you when Moffat does an episode like that, it's when he hits his stride. It's like when you give him a kid and something a little odd, because I understand why people aren't. I'm a huge Moffat fan, but when he's in a groove, you get Girl in the Fireplace, Blink, 11th Hour, Listen, Turn Left. No, he didn't do Turn Left.
No, not Turn Left, but yeah.
Listen. But yeah, when he's in his groove, like he is in this one, I think it's one of the best. I think it literally is probably my favorite introduction to any Doctor, other than the pilot. The original pilot.
Yeah. Right, sure. Right, though, in 16th place, this will be a popular one, I'm sure. Maybe. On 16.4%, Lee, the Five Doctors.
all I can hear in my head is that kind of like hold sound.
That's wind for you, though, isn't it, Lee?
I had the soundtrack to that for such a long time. Not soundtrack, but the music. I love this. It's so cheesy. It's wrong, really. It's a mess. I think it's relatively badly written. It's a cracking idea. It's just throwing all your favourite Doctors together for a bit of a panto laugh, isn't it? And I can't stop watching it. It's one of those things. The Rust on Robot is utter genius. It needs to be brought back.
Well,
I think it's nice to hear that. I think it's nice to hear that people are voting with their heart rather than their head.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Nostalgia kick.
Yeah.
Nostalgia is definitely a big thing. Yes, and Five Doctors. If you were voting for best as opposed to favourite, Five Doctors wouldn't necessarily be in the top 20. But
and this was around the time of the Longleat celebrations as well. So it was a big thing. The 20 years. It was a massive thing. I went to the Longleat. exhibition. It was mad. Didn't get to see hardly anything, but it's too many queues, and I was short, and there was lots of tall people in front of me, and that was about it. You could just hear Peter Davison and smell him from a small distance. But it was an amazing time to live with Doctor Who on TV at that point. You know, Peter Davison or not, whether you like him or not, that period was really exciting, wasn't it, Simon?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, it was, and there was a really lovely build up to it, and yeah, I think I still had the Three Doctors after seeing that in 1981 bouncing around in my head. So the idea of all of that happening again was just incredible. Just the thought of them all being on screen at the same time.
Lead up as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
Got you in the mood.
Well, that was the first one we got to see on the day it was. Well, we saw it before you. Day before y'all did. It was the first time in this country that we got one when it wasn't old, 5 or 6 years old. It was a big deal. I mean, PBS, our public broadcasting, every station who had it aired it at a special time. Like in where I grew up, it was on at Doctor Who was on at 11 o'clock at night on Saturdays. And they put it on the 23rd at like 8 o'clock on almost every public broadcasting channel in the country. So I didn't have a TV in college. I had to go to a friend's house and watch it. And he was like, "What the is this? Just shut up. Keep smoking and the beer's on me. Just leave me alone."
Right. In 15th place on 17%, Terror of the Zygons. Simon.
Again, it's one of these ones that sits in your subconscious. You remember it. I remember it being on TV. I don't think I watched the whole thing, so the full viewing wasn't till much later, possibly even on DVD. So read the Target book, had the Weetabix cards. So again, it's this lack of access, I think, that kind of builds up the kind of reputation of some of these creatures, and I think that's the case with the Zygons. Although because they are so unique and such an amazing design, I think they sit in people's heads. I may be wrong. I don't know whether the story itself is as strong as maybe is it another 6 episode. It's another 6 episode story, isn't it?
It's a 4.
Oh, it's a 4. Oh well, that shoots down my theory.
Started Life was a 6.
Oh, did it? Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, it's not one I would mark highly, but it's one that I love for the fact that it exists, if that makes sense.
Matt, in 14th place on 18.6%. I don't know if you've got anything to say about this that you haven't already said. It's the Demons.
Oh, look, he's ready.
Okay, wait a minute. For those who are listening to the podcast, Matt has put a giant picture of himself behind him, celebrating the fact that he's written a book or something.
I quite like it. So it's not my favourite. I quite like the Demons. I think it should be fairly high, but it's an atypical Doctor Who story. So in Doctor Who history, it's the story without time travel, without the TARDIS, with the military organisation having an equal role to the Doctor. Pertwee's an atypical Doctor at that point. So it's such a strange. It's the Avengers basically with actual supernatural elements. But yeah, it's great. But I'm out talked about it. I have a book. I've written a book. Go buy my book if you want to find out exactly what I think about the Demons.
And while you're there, buy a couple of Johns too.
4 of them if you want.
All right. In 13th place, Mark. In 13th place on 18.8%, The Empty Child.
Oh my goodness. I mean, this is one of those real standout stories from the first series of the new run.
Yeah. Before you go on, so we were watching the first series and we had some of the guest writers already, Mark Gatiss and Paul Cornell, and those gave us an inkling that the guest writers' stories were going to be not necessarily better than the Russell T Davies ones, but that there might be something about them that made them stand out a bit. And then this happened.
Yeah, I think in the lead up to the series starting, Russell T Davies would drop little hints in the Doctor Who magazine about what was going to come. And yeah, we just got a couple of lines about gas mask zombies, and that just set the imagination running. And it didn't disappoint. You know, for a two-parter, it's perfectly paced. You've got such a memorable catchphrase, kind of borrowing from that old sort of Bob Baker and Dave Martin thing they used to do back in the 70s. So yeah, just superb.
I think it's got one of the best best endings, the best cliffhangers and resolve that I've seen in any Doctor Who, really. Still, you know, the whole changing of the face was horrific, and then simply Christopher Eccleston telling them all to go to bed, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Or even go to your room. This is your room. It's it's not just the cliffhanger, but the resolve. You know, and the resolve comes like 15 minutes into the episode, right? This is his room. Brilliant.
Yeah, got this one.
You've read the book about it, John?
No, I haven't. Not this one. No, I knew. I spoke to Rob Shearman about it at the time, and he just said, you know, Stephen, he was really nervous about it, so like he put, you know, the rest of the writers in a room, and he nipped out to worry because he was so nervous about people watching it. And all Rob told me before, he went, actually, it's probably the best Doctor Who story that's ever been written. So, and it's pretty close to that at the time, to be fair.
Well, it's not that far off now. It's 13th out of 400 stories, basically, in this list. Speaking of which, though, in 12th place, we're into above 20% now, on 20.2%. Ross, The Curse of Fenric. What do you think of Sylvester McCoy, Ross? The Curse of Fenric.
I love the Seventh Doctor. I like his second two seasons. I think the show found its feet again in a lot of ways. I think you know, John Nathan Turner his eras are always better when he has a script editor he can leave alone, not to mess the bed. I mean, you know, for that middle part, he's got Sayward, who it just doesn't work. But I think it's tight, and I like of those two Doctor companion pairs. I think McCoy and Sophie are amazing together, and that's a good story. It is just a good. I mean, it works on every level. I mean, I love it. It's one I really, really like. I have a hard time picking a favorite in those seasons because I pretty much like both those seasons are just so tight.
John Nathan Turner works better when he hasn't got a script editor who's like a blind dog hunting for a bone.
John, in 11th place, just missing the top 10 on 22.3%. Should the Robots of Death be in the top 10?
I don't think so, because this is my issue with Hinchcliffe. It is. The script is brilliant. It's a beautifully done murder mystery. The design is absolutely stunning. The casting is spot on, but it's just not got that kind of extra special thing that marks out Doctor Who for me as the great Doctor Who stories for me. It's just a really good example of a type of story done well, and I'd probably say the same of another Tom Baker story, which is going to come up as well.
One thing for me about Robots, is this Robots of Death we're doing? I've lost track.
Yes, Robots of Death.
Well, yeah, I knew that. One thing about Robots of Death is there's a problem with old series Doctor Who of studio-bound stories that feel like you can tell that they're in a particular studio at the BBC. But Robots of Death is one of those stories that flips it and makes such an advantage out of being a studio-bound story, and that improves it no end. Normally, the location-based stories are better, feel more expansive or filmic, or they feel more sort of more dramatic. But this one is a studio bound one that absolutely works, like Ghostlight.
Guys, we're moving into the top 10 now, and before we get to the top 10, I'm just going to throw a thought out there that's probably been a truism for a certain amount of this list, and it's a thought that we've brought up a couple of times. The ones that stick out and the ones that stand out, often in a good way, are often the ones that are a little bit different from the other ones. So, as you were saying about the demons, it's not quite the same as a normal Doctor Who story. We've said that about 2 or 3 that we've talked about. To that end, in 10th place, Matt, on 24.8%, Human Nature. The Doctor isn't even the Doctor.
Yeah, and I think you're right that as John was saying about I think John was saying about Web of Fear, it's difficult to judge because it's so generic. It fits into this kind of generic pattern. And Doctor Who is easier to judge when they don't fit into a generic pattern, where they're so original, although Human Nature isn't exactly original because it's based on a book. But it stands out. It's such an original concept, and it's such a good idea, this whole chameleon arch idea, that multiple showrunners have given their twist on it. It's become a kind of a Doctor Who monster in a way. They've done different variations of it. They've hidden doctors within it. They've hidden masters within it. The possibilities are endless. It's a kind of a series changing story.
And it's also that fact that I think this was the only story where the Doctor becomes truly human for a bit, isn't it? I think this is the only one. And I'm so glad it's a story that's as strong as this, because it could have been a real failure, couldn't it? There's a lot of there are lots and lots of let's be human type stories like Crichton and Data and other aliens turn into humans and this is what I'd like to be human. Oh, snap, back to what I was. But there's something completely different and brilliant about this. That's Paul Cornell for you. But it's staggeringly fun, interesting, and quite scary. Because you got boys shooting guns and it's emotionally trackful as well. It's really good. It's really good, isn't it?
It's working on so many levels, like the stuff about the war message, World War I, and the loss of that. Martha knows that these boys are all going to die. Half of them will die, and the performances, the guest cast. It's when they get a perfect guest cast together.
Yeah,
I mean, Jessica Hines is amazing. She's amazing. That scene in the second part where she tells him to go.
Yeah.
She dismisses him. He doesn't get a hero moment.
No.
It's like because you're dangerous. Because they're playing on the Doctor. Modern Who, they play on the fact that he's dangerous. He can, the people around him, and the perfect use of creepy. Like simple things are made to be scary. A little girl with a balloon is terrifying, and then I think one of the strong things in Modern Who that I think they do a little bit better is making the ordinary horrific.
Right, Simon, speaking of stories that aren't quite normal in some way, in 9th place on exactly 25%, Heaven Sent.
It feels like Stephen Moffat writing a poem is how it feels to me. It feels like this kind of gem, almost like this thing that might have been ticking away in his brain if it didn't bear so much similarity to another story that I'd read fairly close to his transmission by someone who I just happen to know. But equally it's just one of these stories that takes your brain somewhere else, where you suddenly go, but if that happens, then that means, like the idea that the Doctor is essentially, he dies over and over and over again. because he's being killed and then recreated. So the Doctor at the end isn't actually the original Doctor. So, and things like that, and just the way it was directed. I mean, the direction was exquisite. So, yeah, it's an absolute gem. I can't think of any other word to describe it, really.
Well, here's a question then, though, and this is maybe not a question for you necessarily, but anybody, I guess. When the series came back, I think one of the things that was a constant thought at the back of my mind was, imagine if they were to do something like The Deadly Assassin. Imagine if they were to do the Matrix story in the modern day with all the modern filmmaking techniques that you have available to you now. And basically, that's essentially what Heaven Sent is. So did it live up to that expectation? Anybody throw in a thought?
I think so. I mean, it's basically a one-man play. I did theater for a living for a while, and in a very small space, and did a lot of what they call black box, and I designed sets. And the thing of just watching one actor, even though you've got a guy in a monster suit, I mean, who's there, but to carry the story. And I don't think, and to be honest, of the modern Doctors, I think only Capaldi could have pulled it off. I think he's got, I mean, they're all been fine. All five of them have been amazing, but yeah, I don't think anyone else could have done it.
Yeah. I think it also shows a degree of bravery from Moffat as well. I think he's got to the point where he's so confident in his own abilities that he's just happy to put something out that is great for us, established fans. But your average person just tuning in would probably have also been really blown away by an episode of Doctor Who that they might not have expected. They just assumed it would just be some sort of cheesy adventure, and it's this really groundbreaking piece of TV.
It's just something that just occurred to me, something Stephen Moffat does that I don't think any of the other writers do, is he thinks like an artist, and he commits entirely to a concept and an idea, but obviously with a complete love for the series and with a respect for the series. But I think you're absolutely right, Mark, that he reaches the stage. I don't think it's confidence, because I don't think that's something that he exudes from what I've heard and read. But I think it's just that's why I say the word artist, because it's almost like he's got a drive to push things in that direction and to put pieces of work together like that are so brave and so. And that word clever has been overused, but it is so clever.
I've been rewatching that series, and I think what strikes me about Heaven Sent is that it looks like a bottle episode. It looks like a kind of the ultimate standalone episode, but the number of threads it draws in from every story in that series kind of has themes about immortality and living for too long and ghosts coming back and villains becoming heroes and things like that. And it's all kind of woven into Heaven Sent and Hellbent ultimately. But it's so smart. It's so clever.
Right. Lee, sticking with the theme of stories that aren't quite normal Doctor Who, in 8th place on 25.7%, Inferno. A Pertwee right in the top 10.
That's great. That's really great to see. I think that's wonderful.
Above Heaven Sent, though. Really?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I know. No, I mean, if you're looking at artists, if you're looking at somebody who's an artist,
I think the point is, for Simon, there are no Pertwees above this, but there are Stephen Moffat stories above this.
But this is the thing. You've got such incredible writing, Nebula award-winning episodes and things from Stephen Moffat or whatever in this top 10, which should be there because they are just brilliant pieces of TV, well thought out, well created. They're high up on the list for a reason. We all love them because it's just such good TV watching. But there are also those other ones that are nostalgic fueled. There are things that you watch that are just great fun, and also it's just as mad a concept and clever a concept as something Stephen Moffat might come out with, which is Inferno. If you think about it, if Moffat did Inferno, he'd do it slightly differently, but it's not that far flung from his brain, really, that kind of idea. But you know, so you've got an artist on one side, and then you've got a clown on the other, or something a bit more fun and bright and silly that side. And this is what this list seems to be. It seems to be a mix of nostalgic driven episodes and very kind of maybe intellectual episodes, or you know, well written ones that we just go, oh yeah, that's Doctor Who on a that's really good Doctor Who. That's up there with Isaac Asimov. You know,
hey. And if it wasn't for Inferno, Capaldi might not have become an actor.
That's true.
So we might owe Capaldi's Doctor, and therefore Heaven Sent to Inferno.
I think it is a little daring for that time, in a way that you basically, for the middle 4 episodes of a 6-parter, you're asking the entire regular cast,
7 even,
yeah, to play someone different, to play a different character. And I think why it is, I love it so much, because I love the middle 4. That what the world could be, and to see Nick Courtney and Carolyn John and even John Benton, who I don't think John Benton's is the greatest. John Levine is not the greatest actor in the world.
It's invention.
He plays Benton very well.
Yeah. It's invention out of desperation, isn't it?
Yeah.
And speaking of invention out of desperation, in 7th place on 26.4%, Mark, it's the War Games.
Oh, wow. Yeah, just superb story.
I tell you what, before you go on, I was delighted to see a Patrick Troughton story come in the top 10, because they don't usually get that high, do they?
No.
Mark, sorry. Isn't it interesting that every time you speak, I interrupt you?
History of the Blue Box podcast.
Welcome back.
Yeah, like I've never left.
I mean, Mark's probably still trying to make a point on episode 53 of the Blue Box podcast. He just hasn't been able to get a word in.
Just trying to get a word in, yeah.
It's funny how everybody else is interrupting him now.
I mean, what hasn't been said about this one already is there's an awful lot of running to and fro, which in other hands could have been really tedious and boring. But I think Malcolm Hulke and Terence Dicks do a fantastic job when, as you say, the stories fell through and they had to put something together at relatively short notice, and it's gone down as a bit of a classic. There's some great performances, a really good cast. I mean, Mr. Mika is just stunning, or the Master, sorry, I should say. Yeah, we get another great effort from Mr. Maddock as well.
Yeah, I for him alone, I love that one. Just whenever he's in a Doctor Who, it's improved. Even Power of Kroll.
Oh, no kidding. Right, the story that came in 6th might surprise some people that it's not in the top 5, even maybe the top 3. But I've always hated this, largely because in the middle of the first episode, one of the characters uses as a prop on screen on the television the remote control that we had for my television at home. And I lost all suspension of disbelief and have hated this story ever since. In 6th place, on 27.9%, Ross, it's The Caves of Androzani, Robert Holmes' only story in the top 10.
Wow.
Is it right that it's this one, or should it be one of his others?
Nah, this is it's one of those perfect storms. You've got the right director, a very good script. I mean, there's some problems with it, I guess. The monster in the caves and stuff like that. The dodgy costume.
Remote control.
But it's why Graham Harper was still directing Doctor Who in the modern era, because it is so tightly paced, so well. It's a great goodbye. I think it's one of the best final stories of a Doctor, because sometimes they're not the best thing in the world. But I think it's great. There's a reason it won the poll that one time, didn't it? When it in 2003 or whenever they did the top 200.
I think it's won polls twice actually.
Twice,
as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it did. I mean, it deserves it in a lot of ways. It is very. It's not like any of the other Davisons. It's just it. I just like it. I think it should be it should be it should be one of the highest rated of the 80s.
Yes, for certain, for sure. Top 5 time then. In 5th place on 28.6%, John, World Enough and Time.
Oh, what can you say? Stephen Moffat, was that his third go at writing a farewell story? Something like that? And he had another one after it. But this, the more I look at the Cybermen through Doctor Who, I don't think they've ever been particularly done well as anything bar just generic monsters. And this kind of takes the threat of the Cybermen, the threat that didn't maybe quite work in Nightmare in Silver, and it makes it perfect. It makes the Cybermen this invincible force across the galaxies. You know, they're unbeatable, but there's a point to resist it, and it gives Capaldi an absolutely glorious climax. You know, and you go down and play. Well, I don't know. He's a bit older. It might. But yeah, it's an absolutely stunning finale for me for Capaldi. One of the best, and it draws right back through the Moffat era as well. So you know, it's a great goodbye with a little epilogue attached to it afterwards.
It's funny because this is the Stephen Moffat farewell that we were never supposed to have, and yet right at the very end, pretty much, of his showrunnership, he pulls this thing out of the bag that turns out to be one of those Doctor Who stories that is going to live on in people's memories, right?
Oh god, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's also Missy's redemption arc as well. That sort of
I was not the hugest Missy fan. I mean, I love Michelle Gomez's performance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching Doom Patrol now, and she's amazing in it. But it's the Cybermen sometimes aren't scary. They're generic, like John said. It's a generic, but the body horror and the threat of them, and that they're scary, and the bringing back the Mondasian Cybermen with the cloth face, which is a bandage. It's just, and I'm a huge fan of that TARDIS team. So it's a nice farewell for Nardole. I love Nardole. I thought, it was a character that I didn't think I was going to enjoy as a regular. And but just every part of that story is perfect.
Right, in fourth place on 30.7%, Matt, Remembrance of the Daleks.
Yeah, as Ross was saying, I think McCoy. Yes, the third series of McCoy is an uptick, but the second series of McCoy, from Remembrance of the Daleks onwards, that's a real shift in the quality of the look of the series. I think they nailed the writing from Paradise Towers onwards, but actually Remembrance is when they get the direction back on course, they get the look back on course, and they tie it with the writing. And it was so exciting. The pre-title sequence was just unbelievably exciting, and it just sort of screamed Doctor Who is back for 2 years. So yeah, I think it's great.
As a 15-year-old, this is the one that drew me back into the fold, because I had seriously checked out during season 24. I found it embarrassing to watch. I'd have to go off into the spare room to watch it on a little telly, just because I couldn't bear to watch it in front of anyone else. It was just cringy. Although watching it now in hindsight with a slightly more mature brain, I really enjoy it. But yeah, season 25 really kicks it up a notch, as Matt was saying.
Yeah, my favourite season. And again, I was the same as Mark. I was kind of drifting off. And then, by the end of that first episode, the Daleks climbing the stairs, bang, yeah. I was back in completely.
Mm-hmm.
Forever.
And I think it's a real vindication for the Sylvester McCoy era, for Andrew Cartmel, and for Sylvester McCoy himself, that this period of Doctor Who that was kind of written off as kind of the series getting really frivolous and forgettable just before it finished altogether, has now got a story that is so well thought of that it's a regular top 10 in all the DWM polls and that. And in our list here, it's come fourth out of all these stories, out of nearly 400 stories, it's fourth. That's pretty vindicating, isn't it?
I wonder whether any of these votes or any of these thoughts about the programs are enhanced by the reading of the books, because Curse of Fenric, Remembrance of the Daleks, and a few other ones of Sylvester McCoy's in this period, they were enhanced really nicely, weren't they? Especially Curse of Fenric, actually, if I remember. There's a lot of extra backstory being thrown in, and that really made it so much better for me that when I read those books and then rewatched the episodes, I could have all that backstory that you don't really see in the episodes. And Remembrance of the Daleks has got some extra parts, thoughts from characters, the chat with Sylvester McCoy in the cafe, all this sort of thing was a bit more enhanced. I don't know whether or not people are throwing that into the mix as well, or whether it is solely just the on-screen experience.
Might be possible that that's a factor in the story that came third too, to a certain extent, because there was an LP of this, which kind of was a bit of a unusual type of a book for us to enjoy way back in the 1970s and 80s. But in third place on 33.4%, Simon, can you believe it? Genesis of the Daleks. Totally
believe it. If, as we said earlier, people are voting with their hearts as much as their heads, then but equally it's a great story. It's not the best of stories, but when you look at what happens in it and the introduction of Davros and the fact that this stuff is imprinted on your brain from an early age, I just think people will always hold this story hard to their heart. And I just think it's a mainstay. It's just one of those things when somebody asks you, I don't know anything about Doctor Who, which story should I watch? This has got to be one of them, surely.
One of my most vivid memories of the series is Genesis of the Daleks, and always will be, yeah.
It's got 2, maybe 3 really good scenes in the 6 episodes of story.
Hey, man, it's got the foam clamshell. Like, walk around it, Mary. Okay.
Yeah, come on.
Sorry. 4 really good scenes.
Yeah, exactly. At least it's not a TV remote control.
No, but it's actually the fourth Doctor Who story I'd ever seen. Wow. I'm coming home like 12 years old in the middle of the afternoon, and my brother turned me on, and I'd missed Robot, so I started with Ark in Space. So this is the first Dalek story I ever saw.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, I called my brother who turned me on to it afterward and went, I thought you said this was cheesy, man. This is really good. This is, I grew up watching Star Trek. I mean, they have some bad episodes. There's some bad writing. This stuff's really, a little lower production, but Marco Wisher is just so amazing in it. That perfect creation of a villain that even with a somewhat, I just think it's one of those ones that works perfectly. And I will beat up on Terry Nation as a writer sometimes, because when he's bad, he's bad.
Yeah,
absolutely. But when you hold him to ask for something, when he this is as good as one of his 60s ones.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. It's the production of it does it for me, because the other Colour Terry Nation stories, he likes to write survival stories, and that needs kind of an edge that's, it's not there with Douglas Adams, it's not there with Barry and Terrence. So I think it's the only one that gets a kind of sympathetic production.
Right, on the subject of actors coming in and creating perfect villains in Tom Baker Doctor Who stories, in second place on 38.2%, Lee, It's City of Death.
I utterly
and we'll move on.
Hate this episode so much. No, I don't. I love it. The best thing about this episode is the chicken. I love the chicken, and I love it's the audacity, it's the silliness, it's Douglas Adams playing around, doing his best. I think it's one of his best pieces of work, actually, even above Hitchhikers. I love it. I absolutely adore it. And as a kid watching it, I didn't have a clue what was going on. As an adult watching it, I didn't have a clue what was going on. And then as a very mature man, I've just about got my head around the fact that the chicken can die and be reborn again in a bubble.
Well, we must know we're talking about something silly when Lee's trying to persuade us that he's a mature man.
Oh, what an episode, eh?
It's from the best season of Doctor Who of all time, so it's got to be up around the number 1, number 2.
I wonder how Horns of Nymon would have done if that had been in the poll
I'm
instead.
sure it would have been top 5.
Yeah,
I hate
maybe.
to say this. I'm actually looking forward to my season 17 is being released in Blu-ray in America on Tuesday.
Oh wow, yeah.
And I used to bash it, but I've given it a second chance in the last couple of years, and I actually enjoy it. But I did not pick that as my. Me and Jeff picked Creature of the Pit as our number 1 for that season.
Wow.
Wow.
Amazing.
Is that for the green anus scene?
Green anus.
It's not an anus.
Is it an anus or is it the
It's
other
the
one?
That's
It's the opposite.
polite.
The other one.
Is it an anus or is it the other one? I get so confused.
Lee, I don't want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you need to see a doctor, Lee.
I need to see a doctor, Lee.
Yeah.
Oh, prolapses. Anyway.
Right. First place, and I'm assuming everybody's guessed it by now, but I'll read it out anyway. And it was a runaway winner in first place on 45.5%. So it's a clear 6% or so above the next story. And given how close this voting has been, that's quite a distance. Mark, The Day of the Doctor.
It had to be. Oh.
Yes, it had to be.
I think I'm gonna die.
Davros has
Regenerate,
joined us.
I run out of drink as well. Yeah, it had to be, didn't it? I mean, it's just a perfect storm, isn't it? When you consider what Stephen Moffat had to work with when he first took on the job of writing that. I think he only had Jella Coleman signed up, and that was it. So to turn out such a memorable and beloved story is testament to his writing skills.
I mean, it's like it's the 5 Doctors, but done right.
With
Basically.
the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
With it's so it combines the scaffolding of the skill of the story scaffolding of the 5 Doctors, but it has intelligence behind it, so it has meaning behind it. It wraps up stories from RTD, which we didn't know needed wrapping up. It wraps up bits of Paul McGann that we didn't know needed wrapping up. It says something about the Doctor that we didn't know we were looking for, and it does it with jokes. So that's, and it's a brilliant trailer for it as well. I mean, the trailer is so exciting.
I think
that he introduces John Hurt as the War Doctor, and you accept him as the Doctor instantaneously. You do. You buy it. You don't. I mean, I guess some people. This has a. From social media, people bash everything. You're always going to be someone who's going to be bashing it. But this is one I can watch. I've probably watched this 20 times.
It was such a late casting decision as well, wasn't it?
Oh,
so
yeah.
late. Because I think Simon and I spoke to the director of quite a few episodes, Saul Metzstein, and he directed the back, I think, of, is that right? Or the reaction shot or something. He was just.
They did the name of the Doctor.
He did, yeah, but also anyway, whatever. It was the reaction shot. Even he didn't know who it was at that point, and that's how close it was. So interesting, huh?
I think it would have been so easy for a writer, as soon as you get one of these episodes, these anniversary episodes, to spend more time reaching out and saying, right, who can we get in from the show's history? But instead, he focused upon a kind of what celebrating the essence of Doctor Who, as opposed to resting on the laurels and just getting a load of cameos from people, because they could have so easily done that, but instead he just grasped the substance of the show, which is this idea of this changing face and this character and what his journey has been and how he would look back on everything that's happened, but also doing what we again just this whole thing of bringing together all of the faces and all the personalities all together, and how that relates to Gallifrey, and I don't know. I'm getting caught up in.
No, but
just
he's
thinking about
bringing
it.
so many elements together, and all the doctors. You're thinking, how can he possibly use all the doctors in this? It's ridiculous. And of course, it works perfectly within the story that he's created. So I'm wondering whether he started there and then worked backwards. But there's just one nostalgic thing about this is that me and Simon both watched this slightly paralytic at his wedding, because you got married on the 23rd of November. When this aired, right? So we watched, it wasn't live, but we watched it a little bit later in the evening with a whole load of wedding guests. And I think only me and Simon were sitting there really getting what was going on. And everybody else was just going, why the hell are we watching this? Nothing makes any sense. And actually, me and Simon were looking at each other going, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it? But we had a few skinfuls.
Lee was so paralytic he couldn't tell the difference between his anus and the other thing.
I mean, I had the opposite from Simon and Lee. There, I watched it at the big XL event. There were 3,000 fans there watching it up on a big screen. So the reaction when you get Peter Capaldi's eyebrows, and in particular when Tom Baker came on, just went line, and it's just like, it's just perfect. So it's not only got that great story, it's just the nostalgia of it as well. Plus, the book is just absolutely stunning as well.
Yeah, it's excellent.
But John, I mean, that's a really great story about watching it, in such a big place with big, loads of hundreds of people watching it. Oh, that feeling must have been great. But to be honest, I had my arm around one of my best mates. I said my best mate, Simon, and we were just literally watching it drunk. And I
didn't have your arm around
the
other thing.
Anybody else, I would rather have been watching that program with that night. I don't want, it was perfect.
And I ran away and watched it with Steve Ray. I wasn't
Anybody
there.
else want to top that emotional trickle there?
Right, I did intend to start this podcast with a quiz as soon as we're all getting together for a Knees Up for the anniversary, and I completely forgot. So we're having the quiz now. It's a very short quiz. There's one question.
Oh.
I'm going to throw you the names of two characters, and I want you to tell me the thing specifically that connects those two characters. And if you can't get it from those two, I'll add a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. And we'll see how it goes, whether you can pick up on the connection that I've drawn between these two characters. So the first two characters I'm going to throw out in your direction are Stephen Taylor and Barbara Wright.
They both got great hair.
Both companions?
Massive hair.
They are both companions, as Lee said.
The actors have both appeared in two parts within the series.
Oh, for crying out loud, Simon.
Yes.
Let me give you some more names before you come up with the correct answer.
Okay. Simon.
It's hardly a quiz if I can't say the answer, is it?
Yes, the next name was going to be Amy Pond, then Harry Sullivan, then Martha Jones, then the 6th Doctor, and then the 12th Doctor. But Simon got it early, the bastard.
I can shut up now. Go to sleep.
Well, I think Simon wins the night. Mark, has it been nice being back? You have to say yes.
It's been lovely, yeah. I haven't seen Lee for about 10 years, so that's good.
Well, neither have we. So
No, it's been lovely.
good. It's been nice having you back. Do you want to throw out a plug for your podcast then before we sign off?
Thank you very much. Yeah, we are All of Time and Space, myself and Ian Martin. We're watching all of Doctor Who in broadcast order from An Unearthly Child, and we release every couple of weeks, and we're doing season by season. So we've just finished season 3 as we record this.
John, give a quick plug to a book.
But I've written 4 Black Archives, one on Rose, one on Scream the Shalka, one on the 11th Hour, and one that just came out on Invasion of the Dinosaurs. And, they're not quite as good as Matt's book, obviously.
Small but perfectly formed.
Absolutely.
And Ross, give us a little plug for your podcast too before we go.
Well, you can check out my Doctor Who ones, but I'm going to plug my comic book one. If you like comic books and superhero ones, because those are the ones I read. I read more than those, but check out Stop, Let's Team Up. I've just started it. I do jump around and do different topics. once a month, but every Tuesday or Wednesday, I am reading The Legion of Superheroes in publication order from 1958 till now. It should take me about 25 years.
About the same amount of time it'll take Mark to get through all of Time and Space.
Oh, no.
Then.
You're not wrong.
I'll finish well before Mark.
And Lee wants to just plug his Black Archive on The Creature from the Pit.
Oh, can I? Can I do that, please?
It's medical journal on.
I'll do that one. Yeah, that'd be great. John, haven't you got a podcast? Just out of interest.
I do a football one called Busting Balls, but if that's your thing,
No.
no, not
Oh wow, I didn't actually know that. So yeah, John, give us a quick. Tell us what it is.
Oh,
Busting balls.
Yeah, me and my friend Jeff talk a lot of rubbish about football quite disrespectfully, so and we just be very silly about things again. So it's available on all good podcasting platforms as far as I'm aware.
Wow.
I don't want to think about football at the moment. Too
Being
depressing.
an Everton fan.
Yeah.
Oh, you got my sympathy. Tom Baker has your sympathy for you as well.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
How did this
Guys, this has been 10 years. I will see you in the 11th. Until then, I was JR.
I was Lee.
I was Matt.
I was Simon.
I was John.
I was Ross.
And I am still Mark.
And we will speak again soon. Right. I got to find the off button for the recording.